Me brought to you by Burger King. Good morning on you. The Radiance Hogu Mamis. You're sweet. 840 Superintendent outgoing. I got to say that now every time we get you on. Outgoing superintendent. He's a very outgoing guy, and both figuratively and now literally. The resignation coming in. I know it took a lot of people by surprise, John, and I know, and I shot you a text, and we don't really want to say bye because you still got a couple months of what sounds like pretty hard work left under your watch.
Yeah, I mean, I think I came in a couple minutes late here. We're trying to connect because there were just a ton of things I was trying to get through this morning. It just shows that even though I did submit my letter, I've got a full plate between now and then. The good things that we want to get done, and I want to get through the next couple of months successfully. So it hasn't slowed down at all. So if anybody thinks that you can do this and then cruise for 2 months, it's actually different on my side. I think people are saying, okay, well, if that's the case, please get this done. Please wrap this up. Please make sure that, and I want to make sure there's a smooth transition. So. I definitely don't want to leave things hanging if I can take care of them before I leave.
Right. It kind of reminds me of back in the day when we used to ask grandma for permission to go somewhere. It's like, okay, if you're going to go somewhere, you got to do this, and if you don't, forget it. So good luck on that. John, I kind of wanted to start the work session that was last night, right, relative to transgenders and interscholastic sports. Can you kind of unpack that for us? Because I didn't get a chance to watch it.
Well, it was a work session, and as you know, work sessions are held. We issued a public notice so that we could ensure that we could have a transparent, open discussion, and that all board members could attend. But it wasn't an official meeting in the sense that any votes were going to be taken. So it really was an opportunity for the board to gather around while I explained what took place, what the department's position was at this point, and then for the board to weigh in terms of how they thought they would, maybe contribute to addressing the policy questions going forth regarding transgender participation in interscholastic sports. So I walked them through, how we kind of thought through this issue and how we came to a conclusion. And admittedly, this is an evolving, complex, new issue that Guam. Many states and many countries are dealing with, trying to catch up with what is an evolving issue. But when it comes down to it, the issue here is that, the Guam Department of Education is a recipient of federal funds. And as a recipient of federal funds, we are bound to comply with what is called Title IX protections against discrimination. And in recent Supreme Court case and a recent set of executive orders from the president have indicated that under those protections, those prohibitions against discrimination based on sex also includes gender identity. So we know that on the mainland, this has caused a lot of controversy, and there's a divide between states. I think there are about 19 states that have already set policies that allow for transgender participation in sports pretty liberally. There are about 14 states that set conditions for participation. So, it might be looking at your medical information and your registration record at school and so forth. And then there are 8 states that we know of that have actually passed pretty broad bans on transgender participation in sports. So it's as you would guess, it's in the courts. The courts are probably going to be the ones that have to deal with this and provide some guidance. And the U.S. Department of Justice and Department of Education lawyers are activated already and have expressed the position of the agency regarding the protections against discrimination, based on gender identity. Yeah. And when it comes to that, what it means is that there is a higher bar that you have to meet in order to exclude anybody from participating in an education activity, including sports, based on gender identity alone. So that's really the nature of the debate. And hopefully, as we go forward, we'll all have better guidance with regard to, what we should be doing to comply going forward.
John, how many games are left in the girls' rugby season?
I believe there are about 3 weekends worth of matches left. And just to be clear on our position, we have been working with Guam Rugby. Guam Rugby has issued its determination that it should be following World Rugby rules. We told them that that the failure to provide notice to us and to the players that these are the rules that they would like to follow. That meant that they couldn't, under our directive and as vendors, really, they're really vendors of the department. They aren't allowed to dismiss our directive, and they are required to allow participation for transgender females in girls rugby.
Right.
Now, again, we're just going to stay in touch, and we understand that there's more work to be done here, but it's a little bit difficult when we're dealing with an ongoing situation where there is a specific athlete already playing, right, and then to say you can't play. That's something that we think is going to be very risky for us to do, given the fact that we haven't really established guidelines that we feel comfortable with in general, for not just rugby, but for all sports.
Right. Yeah.
So our plan is over the summer to get that, to try to put in place some guidance for the leagues so that we can proceed into next year, hopefully with more clarity about how we can deal with the requests for participation from any transgender athlete interested in playing.
Because it's definitely going to come up again, John. And so you're saying that over the summer you guys plan to is it going to be like sport by sport, institute different policies that deal with transgender participation?
Well, overall, we have to ensure Title IX compliance. So there is going to be overall requirement that any rules that come forward will need to meet that standard. However, we understand that there may be some differences that may be allowable or may be specific to certain sports. And, we're willing to entertain, the different leagues, coming in and giving their input. But at the end of the day, it does need to meet our requirements for compliance. Yeah. And so, I think, it's going to differ from a sport like cross country, and then, contact sports like rugby might have different things that they want us to consider. But in our research and in our review, we're going to have to make sure that it passes a legal review.
How does the hormone therapy come into play? Because I know for U.S. Rugby, right, World Rugby bans it outright, and then for USA Rugby, it's kind of dependent on where the athlete is in the hormone therapy. Because as I'm sure you know, the more hormone therapy you get, the closer you are to being aligned with the gender that you identify with. That's where, to me, it's like really tricky territory, right?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, World Rugby's passed its guidelines. You've got Australian Rugby, you've got other rugby leagues saying we're not going to follow World Rugby. So it's not even like there's a consensus within certain sports and among the national and international federations. There's a lot of debate about two things, right? One is competitive advantage. Is there competitive advantage? And I guess there is ongoing research to try to establish an answer to that question. And then, of course, there's issues related to safety. But again, it's too new at this point. I mean, we've seen studies that have been shared with us that talk about, elite level cisgender male and cisgender females and how they perform. But there isn't any research that, is specific to transgender athletes who may be going through transition, who may be, going through hormonal therapy, which would be more to the point versus comparing, athletes that are not really in that category, right, of trying to be included. The issues of safety in a sport like rugby, I pointed out yesterday that, we've got athletes who are breaking ankles, breaking collarbones as a result of the sport not having to do with transgender participation. Yeah. And, when that happens, nobody bats an eye. But when we speculate about injuries that might occur, we have to really present evidence and good evidence that is different than the injuries that are normally seen after a rugby match. And that's why it's really difficult. I've had girl rugby players, kind of show themselves proud about the black eye or the bruise that they received from the weekend's match. And, it's a rough sport. We did have Mr. Fidenko, he's our union representative, but also, a rugby player. And he pointed out that it's a sport where you have athletes of different sizes, different strengths, different weights, different heights, different speeds. And it's a rough sport. You'll get in, the injuries are common. And how do you differentiate between between athletes who are biological females but have that superior strength and speed versus a transgender athlete who may have similar or less of those characteristics, and then say categorically that we're going to exclude one and not the other. And again, the only basis you can use is gender identity, which we are prohibited from doing.
Right. Yeah. Wow, John. So just if you could tell me if this is accurate. So you guys have written a letter to Guam Rugby because they had said, we're going to stick with World Rugby. We're not going to allow the transgender girl to participate. Then you guys had written a letter and basically said that, everything you just said right now.
Yeah.
So Saturday,
we just said, look, you have a contract with us.
Right.
You're contracting with us. You follow our rules and our guidelines, and this is our directive. Right. And go forth. And let's ensure that we allow for the competition based on that directive. So,
did you get a response from them after that letter?
Well, what I understood was that the athlete in question did not participate in this weekend, right. And we did send an inquiry yesterday or earlier this week to try to understand whether or not that was done at the direction of Guam Rugby or whether it was a voluntary action by the athlete or the school. If it was a directive by Guam Rugby, then of course that's a concern for me. But if it was done, at the school or the athletes, by their decision, then that's something different. So we're looking into that and talking to Guam Rugby to make sure we're on the same page. But ultimately, we're responsible as ISA. Right. We contracted with Guam Rugby. Whatever they do, we're responsible for as well. So that's how it is.
Yeah, it is what it is, right? You have an obligation to protect the department from any type of exposure. Right? At this moment, though, John, do you think that there is exposure?
Well, you never know until someone decides they want to file a lawsuit, right? So they file a lawsuit. I want to make sure that we've taken every action that I can assure to make sure that we've done our best to comply with the law. And if they, if it goes to court and it's argued there and we lose, that puts at risk, federal funding that we have, and it's not just regular federal funding, but everything that we receive as part of our COVID-19 relief. We have to sign an assurance that we are complying with all these federal rules and regulations. So, Dr. Menez raised a good point. He said, they haven't yet revised the rules yet, but, we're still kind of in this area where you have these old rules, that don't quite speak to the issue. Right. You have a presidential order. You have the Department of Justice entering cases on behalf of the federal government. You can't really ignore, those actions, and we have to take all of that into consideration.
Right. John, your response to the lifting of the mask mandates. I saw you guys had put out a release. Can you just kind of speak to and clarify the policy at the school level and just your reaction just to the lifting of the mandates generally?
Well, honestly, as you said all along, we're not public health. We rely on public health to tell us when it's safe and when it's not safe. And so we have been following, as we have throughout the pandemic, the orders of the governor and the guidance of public health. So as the mandate on outdoor masking is lifted, we followed suit right after. And then in anticipation of the indoor masking requirement being lifted, we have also followed suit and lifted the mandates. I think it gets very troublesome when you start creating different rules and new rules that are not in line with what your public health agency is saying. And so we are, again, monitoring and making sure we keep track of what's going on. But ultimately, public health's job is to let us know when we can lift those masks or not, and we're relying on that.
So what are you seeing? Have you been out to the schools since the lifting of the mandate?
Well, I've been out there before and after, and teachers, and well, there's a lot of there are a lot of teachers and students who don't want to use the mask, but who want the option, who like the option. It's not, maybe not all day, but in certain circumstances.
Right.
So students who say I'm going to use it on the bus, but when I'm at recess, I don't want to use my mask. Now that's an option, and I know that our teachers are the same way too. There are certain times where a mask will seem appropriate and encouraged, and there may be times where they don't want to have this absolute mandate. If there's maybe two students in class doing a project across the room and you're across the room, do you have to follow that mandate? Absolutely. So I think the flexibility is good, and of course we're encouraging the use of masks. We encourage the optional use. And we certainly don't want anybody to be made fun of or harassed or bullied because they decide to use a mask. That's the choice of the student, the visitor, or the employee. But ultimately, it's not a requirement across the board.
Yeah, it's interesting, John, because I went around, I did some shopping yesterday, and you guys know just from listening to the program, like I've supported the mandates. I felt like for the most part they were coming from a good place, right? But with the mask thing, I ate lunch the other day. I walked in the restaurant, wore the mask, walked out, wore the mask, and was like, oh my God, I don't have to wear the mask. So I went into a grocery store yesterday without the mask, and I was kind of looking around, pushing my cart, and I noticed that everybody was wearing their mask. So I felt like, oh my God, am I making people uncomfortable here?
Yeah, I think that's going to be interesting because we still see a lot of kids and adults wearing their masks. Yeah. I just think that the issue of I think that's a good part. I think if people are more aware of their health and hygiene, practices. But again, not everybody feels the same way. So if you want to wear your mask, we do want you to feel free to wear your mask. And also, all the other safety precautions that we keep in place for the sanitizing, hand washing, and so forth. We want to keep that in place as well. That was a good thing to do before the pandemic.
Right, I know. There's one thing from the pandemic that I wish we kept was the when they serve you at the buffet, because the price of some of these buffets, I feel like that made it worth it. John, reaction?
No, I don't agree with that. I felt embarrassed to ask for more. So they give you a little bit. You're like, I like more.
Look at me. I need more than that. Both of the waivers, I know Senator Nelson had a couple waiver bills that passed into law. John, your reaction?
Well, we appreciate that we did the 180 days just to align with the reality of the last couple of years not being able to fully operate it as normal. But we assured the legislature, the governor, that our intent is to have our kids at school. Right, we want our kids at school. We know after this experience, last couple of years, that it's best for education, it's best for the kids to be at school every day. So we're not there trying to have less school days than are required. So going forward, I don't anticipate any issue. The issue of service learning was interesting. There was an amendment to limit the exemption to I think this year and next year's graduating classes, instead of the freshmen and sophomores that came in after that initial waiver was granted. So that amendment was made and actually just reflects the status quo. So if it gets signed into law, won't change much. It'll just mean that freshmen and sophomores who are today's freshmen and sophomores are going to have to double up service learning in order to meet their requirements in a couple of years. And I know Senator Sabina did extend the courtesy of her amendment, and I told her that I wasn't in support of it. But ultimately, it means that we have to go and look at our service learning program and find ways to make sure that our freshmen and sophomores are able to double up those requirements and meet them in the next couple of years. And certainly don't want it to be additional pressure on the students. It's sometimes it's hard enough to get enough hours depending on the circumstances. But if the governor signs that, then that's what we're going to have to do to comply.
Do you think that's going to interfere at all, John? Because I know that we're talking about learning loss and all the issues post-pandemic. So if you got students who have to double up on service learning hours, and anybody who's ever had to do the service learning hours, it can be, very time-consuming, obviously.
Yeah, well, I think one thing that we have to do is see if we can rework service learning so that it's easier for students to accomplish and not harder. But I did express that at a time where we're talking about taking care of our teachers and students from a social emotional standpoint, from the standpoint of trying to recover. When people are saying you're learning recovery, how much do we want to add on top of that? And then try to meet all those objectives at once. So I think it got the support of the legislature. So we'll go if it's signed into law, we'll go with it and see what we can do to make sure that it doesn't interfere with our students' ability to finish and graduate once they met the academic side of things.
John, I wanted to ask, because I ran into a lady yesterday who wanted me to ask you about graduations, and I know we talked about it a little bit before, but so are all the schools having like the traditional pre-pandemic graduation ceremony, and do you have any details on the respective schools and where the ceremonies will be held?
The question is yes, we are having traditional high school graduations. You're gonna test me because I don't have the actual schedules, but we do, I believe, starting June 1st might be our first graduation, and then of course I think going all the way till the 10th, I believe.
Okay.
So what we'll do is we'll get a schedule to you.
That's great.
But again, these will be traditional, and I mean in-person graduations. I think one difference will be because we were still in the middle of getting under different guidelines for public safety. There are a couple of schools who are doing it at UOG Fieldhouse, and then the rest I think are doing it on campus. I think Southern High is doing it at Paseo.
Okay.
Right, so there are different modifications that have been made, and we'll get that, but they will take place, and we'll get that out through the schools, and we'll post it and on our websites as well.
Thank you. So Southern High, the lady was asking about Southern High, ma'am, Paseo Stadium. That's an awesome location.
Yep.
John, thank you. Anything in closing?
No, I still have 50 some days. I mean, we could say farewell now, but there may be some things we want to talk about between now and then.
I feel like if we're going to jinx it, if we say by now, this stuff's going to keep coming up. Thank you, John.
Yeah. All right.
Have a great weekend. Right. And tell the wife, said Happy Mother's Day.
Will do.
Okay.
Same to you.
Thank you. 9:03 Thursday, May 5th, 2022. Jon Fernandez there. Really interesting discussion, right, relative to transgender participation in sports and Title IX. And if you see the direction that John is well, it's not really a direction. It's just how it has to be, right, because we're in receipt of all this federal funding and the Title IX protections, they just do apply, right? So it's interesting to balance the way parents feel, right? The way coaches feel, the way probably players feel about this issue of transgender participation in sports. And it's rugby today, right? I know there was an issue with wrestling involving the same athlete during the wrestling season, but I think kind of how they got around that was they just forfeited the matches against that particular athlete. But like John said, over the summer, they're going to have to come up with some kind of policy where they look at the different sports, right? And like you said, for cross country, it's probably a whole different set of rules when you compare it to the contact sports like rugby or football or whatever. 9:04. Thank you guys, sir. Tomorrow's Friday. Yes, excited for this one. Getting you ready for Mother's Day weekend. We're gonna do a big dinner for my mom on Saturday night. Guys, it's Thursday, May 5th, 2022. The show is brought to you by Calvo Enterprises, ITD, and Jack in the Box. My name's Chris. Thank you so much for joining us on this Thursday episode of The Link. And don't forget, we've got the hotspot at high noon, and we've got your 6 with our primetime newscast with the KUAM news team. Joe, sir, great job today. I'll leave you guys with great jam. Let's go down to Molesto and check out Big Ben Ngalta, who's recovered and, according to his Facebook, on his way back to the island. Excited to see you, Chelo. Bonito na lugar. Isla Guahan. Guahus si Chris. Esta Gupa. Adios. Yeah, dog.